Today, we're going to talk about the biggest factor destroying your health. I'm Dr. Jeff Cumrow, a developmental function neurologist, and what I look at is how the brain is functioning, how it is supposed to be developing. So I work with people with autism and dyslexia, autoimmunity, and a bunch of other things, and basically help them develop their brains to the point where they end up with better health, they end up with a better stress adaptability, and they end up with more success in life. And you may have noticed that people who have whatever health malady tend to have more of that health malady over time. If they have autoimmunity, they may tend to develop more autoimmunities over time. If they have pain, they may develop more pain. If they have arthritis, they may develop more arthritis. A lot of us tend to progress in that way. And a big reason for that is the way that our brain is developed, the way that we're able to adapt to stress. And it's easy to look at this and say, as we grow, our brain develops perfectly. But that's really just not the way that it goes. We have all of these experiences, we have all of these traumas, we have all of these injuries, we have all these infections, all these things that can change this. And if we miss just a little bit of one part, or we skip one step or whatever, it has a huge impact on not only our ability to handle stress, but our long-term health. And it may not show up as autism or dyslexia or ADHD or whatever. It may show up later on in life as depression or anxiety or different things like that, autoimmunities. So stress is one of the biggest things that is out there, and we all have stress. And I think that this is something that everybody inherently knows. I think a lot of us are really, really stressed out. And this is evidenced by all the books on self-help. If you walk into the bookstore, you can't walk past a self-help book section because it's just gigantic. And I'm not knocking these books by any means because I own a lot of these. I think they're very important. I think they're very good. But we have to have the neurology working for the psychology to work. So there really is an order to all of this. And it's easy to look at some of this and say, why don't you focus on something bigger? Why don't we focus on, learning disorders? Or why don't we focus on autoimmunity? Or why don't we focus on homelessness? And it's all under the same thing. All of this comes back to the way that the brain is developed. Those people with learning disorders, they have something in the brain that is not firing. They don't have the connectivity that is needed for them to learn in the way that everybody else learns. Not the way that they should learn, because that's really not accurate. They don't learn in the way that everybody else learns because they're still capable of learning. We have to bring that along. Autoimmunity, the same types of things. We have some of the over-connection in those areas that are driving immune function, while on the opposite side is supposed to turn that down. We're not quite as functional. Homelessness, a lot of that is driven by mental health, and depression, anxiety, different things like this are very, very closely related to how connected your brain really is and how functional all of those different parts are together. And David Perlmutter in his book Brainmaker talks about this a little bit, and he talks about the impact of stress on the gut and how stress really throws off your ability for that gut to function. And I think he's missing a really, really big factor in this, because when we look at how our adaptability to stress really occurs, a very, very important aspect of that is the lower brainstem. That lower brainstem has the vagus nerve in it. Vagus nerve goes down and controls gut function. So if we bring these two models together, it makes a huge difference for people. And we have gotten stuck in the healthcare industry, whether it's medical doctors or physical therapists or chiropractors or osteopaths or whatever it is. We've gotten stuck in this find a symptom and fix the symptom mentality, and it's much more complex than that. Instead of finding the symptom and fixing the symptom, what we really need to dive into is what's causing it in the first place. And if you talk to any doctor out there, they're going to tell you that they get to the root cause of whatever. And it's more of a marketing ploy than anything else. There's so many things that are driven by something else, and a lot of us just don't know. And if you look at research on how many doctors out there are following the research, it's easy to say evidence-based practice or the gold standard or different things like this, but the average practitioner is something like 17 to 20 years behind the most recent research. It's difficult to understand some of these things and the mechanisms that are driving them. And when we can get to the root cause, how the brain is working drives everything else. And it doesn't matter if that's the stress response. It doesn't matter if it's the immune system. It doesn't matter if it's learning. It doesn't matter if it's academic or balance or any of these things. The brain drives all of this stuff. Now, when we look at Somebody like a pediatrician, a lot of times they will check your primitive reflexes. And the primitive reflexes are a good reflection of that lower brainstem development. And I have a lot of parents that come in and they say, hey, my child has missed a milestone. They had a primitive reflex that hasn't remediated yet, or whatever the situation may be. And, obviously my concern is, what's the plan on this? And, they're being told that, we'll reevaluate a little while down the road. It may remediate, and if it's not, then we'll do something. And I'll usually check back with these parents and say, what's the plan? And they're like, I totally forgot about it. Like they haven't looked at it again. And there's a lot of this in, again, all types of doctors here, where it's easy to look at something and document it, but you don't really take the time to make the change. There are two ways to make a healthy adult. We can either take an adult who is unhealthy, do the things that are necessary to make them healthy. And that's awesome. It changes the life of somebody, and that's something that we should definitely celebrate. My favorite way on this is to take a kid and make sure that they're developed correctly, and they hit all their developmental milestones, and help them bring along their brain function, their brain connectivity, and help them develop into a healthy adult. Help them develop the habits that are going to keep them healthy. And the reason that this is my favorite is because we end up with, a more healthy, robust life. You have health throughout that whole span. The other part of this is a lot of our health is driven by epigenetics. And if we have a child that we get healthy, we change their epigenetic expression. So when they grow up and they have kids, they pass that healthy epigenetic expression on to their kids. And research shows between 7 and 13 generations are affected by the choices that we're making today. So if we can make the choice to make somebody healthy, we have a huge impact on society. So what is developmental function neurology? If you're familiar with business, there's a bunch of different business systems out there, like Six Sigma and Entrepreneurial Operating System, the EOS. And what those systems do is they break down a business into a series of systems. So they're looking at, this system over here, and this system here, and this system here, and this system here. If this one is not working as efficiently as it should be, but the rest of them are, we address this one. And by making a change in this one right here, we make the rest of it better. If this one and this one aren't working, we work on those two, and that makes everything better. But by changing one little part of the system and making it more functional, we end up increasing profits, we increase revenue, we increase productivity. Everything in the business works better, and that's essentially what we're doing with developmental function neurology. Developmental function neurology, we're looking at the function of different parts of the brain and putting together how it works. Now, a lot of people are stuck on imaging. They're like, why wouldn't you use imaging? And the fact of it is, when we look at the brains of people with autism or autoimmunity or ADHD or different things like that, there's not a ton of difference on imaging between somebody with those diagnoses and somebody without those diagnoses. So it's very hard to elucidate exactly what's happening in them. Better way to do this, and I mean the other way, we could do this, I suppose, would be use subjective testing. How do you feel? Like what's your struggle? Different things. But if we ask somebody how they feel and we do some sort of treatment, how do we know they're better? Is your memory better? Maybe, maybe not. Are you feeling better? Maybe, maybe not. It's hard to remember those things. It's hard to compare those things when we don't have that. So what I use is functional testing. We use objective testing to see exactly where we're at. How many squats can you do? How many push-ups can you do? What's your verbal memory like? What's your visual memory like? And when we can put all of these things together, what's your balance like? We can use computerized testing for the balance. We can use computerized testing for eye movements. The more things that we can put together, the better picture of brain function that we can get. The better we can track what we're doing with our therapies. So, ultimately what we're looking at is having the hardware is important, and that's what imaging looks like. But having the hardware with the software is the important part. And the imaging doesn't give us any idea if we have the software, if the software is functional. That's what we're looking at in developmental function neurology. Obviously, as we have better connection, we end up with better overall health. We end up with a better, more robust stress response. And that is the number one thing that is holding people back is, we end up with poor health because we don't have the tools we need to deal with stress. We end up, making poor choices, or it breaks down our immune system, it breaks down our blood pressure system, and that deteriorates our neurology and different things like that. So without the function of the system, the software, we don't have as good a function, we don't have as good health outcomes, we don't have as good adaptability to stress, and this is why we see some of these symptoms progress. People with pain tend to have more pain. People with autoimmunity tend to have more autoimmunity. People with arthritis tend to have more arthritis, and so on and so on. And it's a vicious cycle until we do something to stop it. So again, I'm Dr. Jeff Cumrow. I'm a developmental functional neurology, and if you like talking about health, if you like talking about neurodevelopmental disorders, if you like learning more about success, subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you on here. We're going to talk a lot about it.